Moving on to something that is definitely queer, I am sweating my ass off. And it's just gays in space, you know? Well, mostly lesbians. And he just goes ballistic. Like, it's violent. It's brutal.
Hi, subscribers and future subscribers. It is I, the Great.
Okay. Hello my lovely readers and queers, welcome back to my channel. I am Franny and today I'm going to share with you the books that I read in the month of July. And I think that this is going to be a relatively short video because I didn't really finish many books in the month of July. I started a bunch of things that I am still currently reading. So the books that I started and finished in the month of July are just five books. And with this heat, a video that is short to film is actually what I need the most. So without further ado, let's jump right in.
Are you filming?
Yes. Well, not right now because I'm talking to you.
If you see me passing, just ignore and continue with talking.
I can't ignore you.
Hi, subscribers and future subscribers. It is I, the Great.
Okay. So, as I was saying, in the month of July, I read 5 books, 2 of which were audiobooks and the other 3 were graphic novels. And the average rating was 4 stars, so another good month. First book that I read, and it's actually the best book that I read in the month of July, is Lady Killers, Deadly Women Throughout History by Tori Telfer. This was narrated by Jamie Lemchick, and I do recommend the audiobook if you want to read this book. I really loved it, and I was not expecting it, so it was a very pleasant surprise. The title is pretty self-explanatory, but basically this book focuses on female serial killers throughout history. When we usually talk about serial killers, when we watch shows about serial killers, when we listen to podcasts about serial killers, we mainly see men. We mainly see male serial killers, as if female serial killers have not existed. And the few ones that we are aware of, the few ones that are talked about in the media, are depicted in a funny way or in a sexual way. For instance, Nanny Doss, the giggling granny, who was given this funny name by the press and journalists, but she poisoned most of her husbands, like 4 or 5 husbands and family members as well. Or the Blood Countess that tortured and killed hundreds and hundreds of poor young women who became her servants. And now the Blood Countess is depicted in movies and shows and books like this sexy lesbian vampire, which is not at all the case. So the author's objective was to try and give a faithful portrayal of these women throughout history, throughout countries. She talks about the giggling granny, but she also talks about Raya and Sakina, 2 Egyptian women who had a prostitution ring of sorts. And she tells us about their life, about their victims, the murders, and if there were trials and how they ended and how they died. I think that there are 10 or so serial killers covered in this text, and I just loved how the author was able to really get into the psyche of these women as much as she could without making things up. It seemed like she was really trying to stick to the facts and to the research that she did. And she talks about this in a way that doesn't glamorize the gory details of the murders, but that actually wants to highlight how brutal and violent and serious these murders were. It was very informative, it was very detailed, and I definitely know more now than what I used to, so I think the book served its purpose and I really enjoyed it. So definitely a 5 stars read. The other audiobook was The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This one was narrated by Caitlin Davis, and it is a cozy fantasy standalone that I really enjoyed. I think I read it at the perfect time because it has a very summertime, summer vibes sort of setting, and we follow an introverted librarian who has to flee the library in which she has worked and lived for many years because rebels against the empire have set the library on fire. So she flees, she goes back to her hometown, the island of Caltray, and when she reaches the island, she goes back to live in her parents' old cottage that is in an abandoned and neglected state. So she brings it back to life. She opens a gem shop that is sort of a front for her real activity that she wants to have, which is a spell shop, because according to her, knowledge is power and spells that can help people should be shared with everyone. Magic shouldn't be a knowledge that can be accessed only by academics and sorcerers. So she opens this gem slash spell shop, and reluctantly she finds herself opening up to the other islanders, to a man that she used to be friends with, to all these lovely neighbors who genuinely want to help her because she's one of their own. As days go by, she becomes closer and closer to them, but at the same time she has to try and protect her books. She has to keep these books hidden. She has to try and mask the fact that she's actually selling spells and not natural remedies, because technically she broke the law. If imperial investigators were to catch wind of what she's doing and were to come to the island, then she could be at risk. She could seriously be punished. It was very lovely. It was mostly about the characters and the sense of community between all the characters, the magical creatures, the spider plant, there's a talking cactus. The stakes were very low. You don't really feel the danger, even if it's kind of looming in the background, and it was just so lovely. I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say that this book is queer per se, but it does feel like it is set in a queer normative world, and there are some queer side characters. So while it didn't necessarily feel queer, if that makes sense, there's definitely that aspect as well, if it's something that might interest you. Moving on to something that is definitely queer, I read Volume 1 and Volume 2 of The Cosmoknights by Hannah Templer. This is a graphic novel series that I think is incomplete. I hope that there's going to be a third volume coming at some point, because the second volume kind of had an open ending, sort of. It did feel like the characters' adventures were not done. So this is a sci-fi series set in a world where we have many planets, and each planet has a princess. There are these jousting games in which Cosmoknights fight, and the Cosmonaut that wins the jousting games organized by a specific planet wins the hand of that planet's princess for the person who hired them. And that's how you have political, economic marriages and matches. And in this series, we follow a group of Cosmoknights that work together, that fight together in these jousting games to win the princesses, but they do not deliver them to anyone. They're not mercenaries. They fight in these games so that once they have the princess, they can free her and she's not forced into a marriage. And in this story, particularly in the second volume, and I'm guessing in the third one, whenever it's going to be released, they're trying to not only compete in the jousting games to free the princesses, but actually to try and stop the games for good. And it's just gays in space, you know? Well, mostly lesbians. It is so much fun. I love the drawings. I love the illustrations. The story is quite interesting and quite fast-paced. I am curious to see what's gonna happen next. The first volume was slightly more confusing. It still wasn't quite clear to me how everything worked, the logic behind the games and everything. And the second volume definitely worked on that a lot more. So I gave 3.75 to the first one, but the second one was a full 4 stars. And we're kind of ending on a negative note. Not quite negative, but it was my least favorite book that I read in the month of July, and that is Love Me, a romance story by Francesca Perillo. This is a graphic novel about a robot who lives in New York in the future. I don't know, I want to say 3000 something. It's very far in the future. It is set in a New York where humans coexist, cohabit with robots, even though people don't like robots. This robot is a taxi driver. He's very sweet. He's a hopeless romantic. Jojo, the robot, he falls in love, like he completely loses it for this woman, Gilda. When they meet, it's love at first sight. They meet in his cab, they talk for a while, and Jojo just decides that this woman is the love of his life. She's the only chance that he has at happiness, at ever being in love with anybody. The woman, Gilda, she's vibing with him as well, and so they decide to go to a movie theater that night. Jojo goes there, the woman doesn't show up, and the day after, no word from her. He's depressed, right? And then he finds out that she is involved with the mafia, and he just goes ballistic, like fighting and kicking and shooting everyone that he finds in his way to go to the woman and free her. And that's the graphic novel. I don't know, I thought it was going to be a romance story. His robot and this woman getting to know each other and, I don't know, talking and going on dates. I was not expecting the story to go in that direction. I had no idea whatsoever. So the story was very weird. I was not really into that because it just felt so sudden and unbelievable. And I don't know, I didn't feel the connection between the two of them or anything like that whatsoever. What I did love were the illustrations. They were so peculiar and so gorgeous. I really, really loved them. And I also love the fact that at points, the narrator of the story was Jojo's cat, and the cat was hilarious. So there was that, but it's violent, it's brutal, you know? And I mean, the title is a love story. It's literally a romance story between a robot and this woman, but it's not, I don't know, it's not what it was. So I gave it 3 stars, and that's that on that. So that's what I read in the month of July, but I did tell you at the beginning that I had started a bunch of things that I'm still currently reading, and that's why I only completed 5 books. I am currently reading, and I'm actually almost finished with it, The Girls Have Been by Tess Sharp. I wanted to read The Girl in Question, which is the sequel, and I wanted to remind myself of the story, of some details that I realized I had kind of forgotten because it's been 3 years since I read the first one. So I am kind of speed reading through it, and now I'm refreshing my memory. So I'm very happy about that. So I can move on to the sequel, remembering things, right? I also started listening to the audiobook of Queen Bee by Juno Dawson. This is a prequel in Her Majesty's Royal Coven series. The audiobook is narrated by Nicola Coughlan. I'm curious to see why it was important to read this origin story of Her Majesty's Royal Coven, because I'm guessing that there's a reason why Juno Dawson decided to write a prequel instead of just keep going with the sequels. So I'm really interested about that. I had also started These Letters End in Tears, which I totally plan on continuing, but at the moment it's kind of on the back burner. I think I'm going to resume it in September, so it is not an active currently reading book, but it is something that I started in July, and it did take some of my reading time. So there's that. And this is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I am sweating my ass off. I don't know how I am forming coherent sentences right now, but I'll take that as a win, okay? Let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of these books, if you would like to, and let me know what you read in the month of July. Thank you again so much for watching. I will see you very soon in another video, but until then, have a good one, take care, and keep reading queer books. Warm hugs. Bye.